Thank you. Thanks so much for having me and for that warm welcome. Anita is fantastic, right? We've only had a few conversations at this point, but I'm already thankful for the relationship that was formed in the Heavenlies and that worked its way into 2018. By the way, don't give up on 2018 just yet. You know, it's good that you're in here. I sent out a message just by way of Instagram, maybe at the beginning of the week. I think it was on Monday. And what I was saying is, so many people are going into cruise control right now and planning for 2019. You know, everybody's planning for their turkey comas and doing their Christmas shopping and all of that. But the smart money is doing what you're doing right now. We are hunkering down, taking advantage of every hour, minute, second left of 2018, because then that's the real head start on 2019 by utilizing this last month and a half to the best of our abilities. So when Avis asked me to do this, she said, you know, Monique, you're an advocate, and you can talk to people about what it means to be an advocate, and she's right. So that's kind of where my inspiration is coming from for today. From the time that I was 7 years old, I had decided I was going to be an attorney. And I had promised my parents that when I became an attorney, I would give them matching Volkswagen Bugs, because at 7, that was like the cool car to have. And they still remind me that I owe them those Volkswagen Bugs. I've done okay with some other things, but I still probably owe them that. But from that time until now, which is as of last week, 7 plus 41 years later, because I'm 48, I've been advocating in some way, shape, or form. I have been advocating on debate teams for a position or another. I've advocated from student government as a Speaker of the House. I went in and advocated in my law school, leading at Howard University, my student body there, and as captain of our trial team. And then I changed that advocacy into official legal advocacy on both sides of the courtroom. I've worked as a plaintiff's attorney, I've worked as a government attorney, I've worked as a defense attorney, and now my favorite posture is kind of in TV world as an analyst and working behind the scenes as a crisis manager, advocating for organizations like yours. Sometimes when they're in more trouble than they really would need to be, which means I wish they had called me sooner so I could have talked to them about risk management instead of talking about crisis management. But either way, it still ends up being advocacy. And I know, because of why you're here in this room, it really is about your ability to advocate for whomever your constituency is, for whatever the cause is that you are representing. Can I just get somebody tell me, what's your organization?
Wayne State University.
Okay, yeah. So you have a lot of very important minds that are counting on you to be heard on the Hill. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. Who are you here with?
Kansas City, Kansas Community College, the Business Leaders United.
All right, and you?
Advocating for manufacturers and those that would go into manufacturing as careers.
Okay, and what's the name of your organization?
MAMTAC, so we're part of NIST MEP, or part of a national network.
Do I need to say behind this?
No.
Tell me. Okay. Right there in the back. Who are you here with? I'm looking at you. You turned around. Yeah. Both of you. Okay.
Real estate management.
Mm-hmm.
Police and civilian accountability.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. On behalf of what organization?
The Civilian Office of Police Accountability.
Okay. Okay, so we've got HBCUs, we've got women's issues. I know Anita told me that. We've got police accountability, and I spent a lot of years defending police departments, so I probably have some things to say that I won't say today about that. But, okay. So the question I really would like to answer for you is, if you don't already have your own answers, why advocacy is critically important during these times. Why, for everything that you're doing, finding a way to break through the maze and the mess of what it is to be on Capitol Hill right now, to have your particular voice heard. And there are many reasons why you may think it's impossible to do, especially if you are a smaller organization, if you're underfunded, but everyone pretty much thinks they're underfunded right now. So if you're a party of one, or if you're an organization of 5, if you're an organization of 100, or if you represent 5,000, there are challenges in each of those lanes. But as a lifelong advocate, it occurs to me that, the civil rights movement started slow and small and underfunded, and it changed everything for this country. We're still in progress, obviously, and in process, but we got a lot of work to do. But if they hadn't started in those rooms, right, figuring out how to advocate for their positions, figuring out how to get their voices heard, figuring out whether that would mean meetings and protests, meetings or protests, which people to send in the room, which people to keep on the street, which people to be rabble-rousers, which people to be negotiators. All of that is advocacy planning. And then, as I know Anita's probably pointed out, legislation. Who's going to be writing? Who's going to be drafting? What shape of readiness will you be in? But all of that is advocacy. Same thing for women's suffrage, right? It's the advocacy movement that put that in motion that led to, what is it, just about 100 years ago? Not quite. Us having the ability to walk in as women and have our voices heard in the most important place, which is the polls. Environmental movements, advocacy. Smart advocacy, I would say, because especially in that movement, they have to be very selective and get through the noise of people who just disbelieve science and get the right people to explain it in a way that somebody like me, who went to law school for a reason, because science, math, not really my thing. So I'm encouraging my daughter to be a STEM girl. I'm like, don't do what your mom did. I have struggled with basic math, but whatever. Okay. Black Lives Matter. Right, that's advocacy. Those are grassroots advocacy organizations coupled with infrastructure, coupled with people who have more experience and exposure in figuring out how to marry those things. But I don't have to tell you, there's advocacy on the other side of every single one of those sectors that I just named. The Tea Party was advocacy. Prime, successful, funded advocacy that grew from a small movement, really some argue a movement of one, into something that turned this world, I'd like to say this country, upside down, and we're still kind of not right side up. White nationalists, that's a movement. That's an advocacy movement. Those are people who have a particular purpose, a particular message, a particular agenda, and are infiltrating the highest levels of our government in order to get their wishes known and get their agenda pushed forward. And it's showing up in our government, it's showing up in legislation, it's showing up in our local levels, and it is a movement. Okay. The NRA, advocacy movement, and a whole lot of money, and a lot of infrastructure that started with something that we would all consider a fundamental right because it's in our Constitution, but has been thwarted. I don't know what anybody's positions are. I'll just step out here and say thwarted for the purposes of a few powerful people, something that we probably could all find a way to agree on as part of the fundamental canons of our country, but that has now turned into something that means when I send my children to school, like I would pray anyway, but I have to pray extra because there may be somebody with just military machinery that chooses that location that day. That's what a movement has done. Movements, alliances, advocacy groups can be for good or for evil. They can be for the powerful or they can be powerful in numbers. But at the root of all of it is going to be you. Whatever the movement is, it really is, in essence, coming down to individual achievement coupled with another and another and another. And so my first message would be there's no such thing as too small, right? If you are a purposeful advocate and you know how to make alliances, then you are enough, in essence. Now, I don't know, Anita, you can tell me, have we talked some about the political process? I'm not going to explain it now. I'm just wondering whether we've gone through it this morning. Okay.
We've just been showcasing wonderful, extraordinary thinkers like yourself.
Oh, goodness gracious. Thank you, Anita.
We're going to get to the nuts and bolts after they eat.
Okay. So then my first one, kind of in the why me, one of the things that people say to me all the time is, I don't know the political process. You know, I live in Dallas, Monique, and I'm trying to get something, because people think because I'm in DC, okay, well, certainly you know Senator so-and-so. Yeah, not so much, but I am closer in proximity. I'm an Uber away, but what is it you're trying to do? And would I even be the best voice for it? Because it's more likely that if Senator so-and-so is from your home district, from your backyard, you're the advocate. You're the voice that will matter, because you're the one that they need to go back home and say, I went and saw my member. And my member listened to me. And this is the reason why my members should stay in. Even if you don't get everything you want out of that first meeting, that first 20 meetings, that first 4 years or 6-year term. When somebody's coming up for re-election, they're going to want people like you who are right there in the trenches saying, we got heard. And we took things and they were taken seriously. And we had an opportunity to go back and be heard again. So in the why you of it, you are an expert in your field. You don't have to be an expert at politics. You can associate with people who are experts at politics. Your job is to know manufacturing. Your job is to know the women's rights issues. Your job is to know what your educational field and school needs. Your job is to have those things down pat. Right? Because if you're an expert in your field and you have that knowledge, all you need with that is a story. Does anybody understand what I'm saying? Yes, ma'am. Right, okay, a moving story, because that's what we care about. That's what's gonna make for the introduction mattering. It's that you have all of the knowledge that you need and you have a moving story. But I would add, you have to have a moving story, but you have to have right delivery, right? I worked, my first 2 Hill jobs were for Congressman Jack Brooks, who was my home congressman because I'm from Galveston, Texas. And then I worked for Congressman Charlie Wilson. I'm one of Charlie's kind of pseudo-original angels. And if you, any of you know about those 2 men, I don't know if anybody can picture remembering Jack Brooks and forever having the cigar in his mouth. And he called me sweetie back when it wasn't offensive to call somebody sweetie, because I knew he really believed in me and thought I was smart and bright and talented, but was old school. You know, I know they couldn't get away with that today. Darling, sweetie, I'm a Texas girl, so those are things that I probably have a little bit of a different view about than some of my powerful women peers. But he'd come in and he'd say, sweetie, and granted, I'm like a fellow at American University, so I'm there to learn. I'm not getting paid, at least when I first started there. And he'd say, come with me to judiciary. Come with me to committee meetings. You know, I would be gone from the office for days at a time. They would have work that I was supposed to be doing, but he gave me the value of that experience. And what I learned trailing him in his meetings is he really cared about people knowing what the hell they were talking about. Don't come to a meeting with me and I know more information about it than you. You're coming about your topic, your agenda, your field. There ought to be no question I can throw out at you that you can't push an answer back to me, and your answer ought to be more current than the last time I looked at this topic. So that mattered, and he was kind of an intimidating force. So people who came and were ready to have those conversations, that mattered. Charlie Wilson, similar but different. You got to know the member you're going to talk to and what's going to matter to them. He wants to sit and have lunch for an hour and a half. And he wants to have polite conversation. And he wants to talk about whatever team's doing well in your jurisdiction and whatever place your children went to school and the time that he remembered, et cetera, and et cetera. And you can't be so anxious to do business in that environment that you aren't ready to advocate, because advocacy means I'm in the room now. I've got to have my ask ready, but I got to have timing. So I have to know who I'm dealing with. I'm not dealing with somebody like me who, if I'm sitting down, like okay, so you have to tell me on it. It's like, and the reason we came is, it barely, hi, let's order and talk. No. So your data, great. Your research, great. But if your research is not also research of the decision makers, then you're missing a category. Because advocacy means when I'm in front of a decision maker, I have everything I need in order to deliver the appropriate message, the appropriate way, the appropriate time to that particular person. And it may switch up. So if you've got a team of 3, then you're going to be really smart about who you send where. Okay, you're gonna, everything is not for everybody. And sometimes we don't get the results that we're looking for just because the wrong voice went into the room. One of the things that I know for sure with my clients that they get in me is likability factor. Right? Because I go in a room and it's just hard to hate me. It's hard, you know, even if we're talking about hard things, I don't have to talk about it in a hard way. So if you're dealing with hard things, you probably don't want to send like the maddest person in the universe to a congressman with an opposing viewpoint. You need to bring some Texas charm or some Idaho sweetness or something that makes your advocacy well received. Right? And if you know, like as they said, staffers, your job is to educate, then you want to educate with patience. Not necessarily with frustration, right? Because I remember being in that position and doing those jobs and being completely overwhelmed and getting like 30 position papers for 30 different topics, and my member and the LD and the staff assistant, like they're looking at me and saying, what does this mean? And I'm like, I'll have a college degree next week and maybe I'll be able to tell you better. So you know what those offices are like. And knowing that means have some compassion for these people who most of the time really do mean well underneath the member, you know, whatever you think about the member's particular political view and how it opposes your own. The staffers are in some like grunt jobs, right? And low pay even now. And they are there because in one way or another, they believe that they can influence this country for the better. So come to them giving them the benefit of the doubt on that. And that will make for a better advocacy relationship that is not necessarily adversarial. So if you're saying my group is small, my group is underfunded, it won't make a difference, I mean, there are too many examples to name. You know, I don't know, from George Washington all the way to women's suffrage to MLK. I mean, everybody was small, everybody was underfunded. Don't make those excuses about what it is you're trying to get done, because all it really takes is one voice. Now, I have an excellent example of that right now. Has anybody talked about this criminal justice reform legislation that's about to come out? Have we touched on it a little bit? Okay, so the legislation is important, and I would encourage, you know, the prison system touches all of us in some way or another. Either we know someone because we've been victims of crime, we've had family members who've been victims of crime, we've had family members who have been accused of crime, we've had somebody we know to touch that system. And what they are about to do, if they pull it off, and I pray that they do, is make that system work better for those who are incarcerated so that they can bring back good time, early releases, and less time for doing well while they're in there so that they can learn and be job ready before they get out so that we don't have the type of recidivism rates that we have. But the reason why I'm mentioning this is because the groups of former incarcerated people, very small groups, found big names and got them to care. Van Jones picked up this issue because somebody knew somebody who knew somebody. And Van Jones had a prior relationship with Jared Kushner, and Jared Kushner had a personal attachment to the topic. So think about what that advocacy looks like. We don't know the names of any of those groups of prior incarcerated people. We don't know who really is on the ground who made this happen. It's gonna come out if it goes off the way that they hope, and it'll be Van Jones saving the day and Jared Kushner saving the day, and God help us, President Trump signing something that helps the entire country. It doesn't matter. Stand down your ego. Associate with people who can get you in the room, even if you don't get the credit, even if you're not the face of it, even if it's not your voice. Know that what you stand for is so important that if you've got to send Anita in the room, if you've got to send Monique in the room, if you've got to find your own Van Jones, if you've got to associate in media with somebody like Roland, make those alliances. Because then in the era of social media, you've got all the power in the world. You know, you can be one person who gets somebody who has 500,000 followers to care. And now you're 501,000 people exposure in a tweet. So I say that to say your size has nothing to do really with the success of your advocacy. Tip O'Neill, it's his quote, and I don't know how many of you know, all politics is local. That's former Speaker Tip O'Neill's quote, and that's the other reason why your size in this instance does not matter, because you're coming from somewhere. And those people on the Hill are here to represent you. So when you bring your localness into this national stage, the most important thing you can do, which I think I heard Mignon say before, is to find a constituent to get you to the member, because that is a connector, right? That's a prime connector. And then another example, it didn't necessarily go the way that I would have hoped, but Kavanaugh, you remember the two women at the elevator? Two women at the elevator, right? Victims of crime. Second language, US citizens who came on bus and drove to get into that building, which they have a right to, and maximized a moment at an elevator and caused for the changing of a mind and a delay of schedule and a negotiating around things that mattered to the world. Two women, not nearly the funding that any of us have in this room right now, but passion, knowledge, willingness to advocate for themselves, for their daughters, for all of us. So there's no such thing as small, and it is local, and they took their local into national, and it worked. Just a couple more. I know you guys know where legislation is concerned. Well, I can't even say this right now because we have kind of a do-nothing type Congress, but usually there's a lot of legislation. There's a flurry, you know, there's like 5,000 pieces that are supposed to be in one stage or another at a particular time, and there's a lot going on Capitol Hill. So your job as an advocate, and the reason why you're important to your organization and your own constituencies, is because you cut through that. So you find whatever your unique ways are to cut through the noise and to cut through the endless paper in order to make human-to-human connection, in order to make your particular need, because that's what you're trying to meet. You're trying to meet needs of your organization. You find a way to make those kind of float to the top. And because legislation moves slowly, and it's supposed to, because ideally it would be checks and balances, maybe we'll see more of that right along through here, but slow doesn't necessarily work against you where the Hill is concerned. That gives you time to work relationships. That gives you time to mold things such that you get whatever it is you're trying to get out of it. It gives you time. Really, when you show up, you can meet people who can help you along your way. So this room is rich for people who want to cross-pollinate and work together, even if it's just, I've been to that member before and here's the intel I can give you about that. The last thing that I think you really have to be in this day and time is loose, right? You don't want to be rigid. You have to be flexible. There has been so much of, in the past, for many nonprofits, for many smaller organizations, for people of color, for women, such a lack of liberty. We have been bound in so many different ways, and I know that you're probably representing people who understand the experience of a lack of liberty, of a denial of rights. But in order to effectuate liberty, you have to be loose, okay? You can't be so stuck in your own space that you're unwilling to see the other side so that you can effectively advocate. The thing that works more for me, whether I'm in court or whether I'm in a head-to-head combat kind of battle in debate land TV, is that I know the adversary. You know, I mean, I know not just their tells or their weaknesses, I know their motivation. I know the things that they care about. And if there's a way that I can meet minds with somebody, I have a way for you to get what you want while I get what I want. That requires flexibility. I know that if you're loose, you know, you already love whatever it is you're doing. I hope you do. Everybody love what they're doing? Because there's no reason. Okay. You love what you're doing. I want you to be open to be exposed to other people's ideas, other ways of doing what you're doing. Anybody who thinks they know everything, okay, they just prove they don't, right? So don't be that person. Be open to receive. You really have to occupy the space that you're in. You have to, and I'm not really just talking about like DC Occupy or Wall Street Occupy. I love those movements. Again, advocacy movements, movements that have had some success. But occupy your territory and your space in that you really are an expert in your field and you can become known for it so that when members see you, they understand that. You have to be secure in your position. As women, sometimes the whole seat at the table thing, as people of color, the seat at the table thing, we have to be secure in knowing that I really don't owe anybody an explanation for why I'm chosen to do whatever it is I'm chosen to do. And Anita and I just had that conversation. You don't have to defend yourself, right? Know who you are, be secure in it, and move forward. And then don't be afraid to be a little edgy. Edgy, because there, you know, the safety is here. The NRA doesn't have to really be edgy because they have so much money. They are entrenched in their positions and they don't really have to work with other people. But when you're trying to get things done and it's going to take a group of people to get it done, you got to get way out here on the edge. You know, you're not just looking for the fruit you can easily grab. You're going to have to be really ready to stretch. Okay, and I hope that while I was telling you those, you understand that L is loving your job, O is being open, O is occupying, S is secure, and E is edgy. Stay loose. Thank you for having me.